So last week we were here talking a little bit about safety, a little bit about force continuum. So today we want to probably pick up a little bit on that, a little bit on the safety rules, things that you do or don't do at the range, a little bit of safety on the range, the Second Amendment. And before we get into that, we'd like to maybe, what's on your mind, Dave?
Well, you know, a couple things occurred today and a few days ago that made me stop and pause. I need to say off at the very beginning here, I guess, that I'm not an attorney, okay? So what you're hearing from me is not a legalistic view. It comes from rational thinking, it comes from years of training, it comes from conversations I've had professionally with law enforcement people, attorneys, judges, common people like ourselves, you and me. I've had a girl at work ask me today, I shouldn't call her a girl, I guess, perhaps, have a young lady work with me that today she asked me, how soon after I give birth can I start shooting? Well, she's due about the 1st through the 6th of September, so that's soon. And I told her, I said, well, as far as I'm concerned, you can start shooting anytime you want to after the baby's born, unless, of course, you're planning on breastfeeding. And she said, well, that's what I'll plan on doing. Why can't I shoot while I'm breastfeeding? Well, let me tell you, whatever you do on the range is going to go with you, however far you let it come with you. There's a couple of things that happen. When you're shooting, you're exposing yourself to lead toxins, you're around gunshot residue all the time. You breathe that stuff in, gets into your blood system, and if you're a breastfeeding mother, you don't want that to get into your baby's milk, so you want to stay away from that. To get better ideas about that, perhaps you might want to consult with your physician, right, and talk with them about what you're planning on doing, and kind of go from there. But you sure don't want to be shooting a handgun while you're breastfeeding a child. Another thing that I talked about with a good friend of mine, he's in law enforcement, and he was talking a little about embarrassing the company. Now think about what you're doing. You're about ready to embark on a journey to where you're going to want to carry your handgun all the time, okay? You're going to take a concealed weapons course perhaps. You're going to buy a handgun. You're going to get a holster, and you're going to put that thing on. You're going to carry it, and you're going to want to have your pistol with you all the time. Now, a pistol is a tool that we use for protection of ourselves and for protection of others. We don't necessarily want to go out there and brandish our weapon, because that's illegal too. You can't brandish your weapon at all, so don't use that as a topic of concern when you're engaging yourself with somebody that might cause you bodily harm, because it might quickly escalate the situation. Plus, you never know who's out there with the video camera, and if you get caught on video, a lot of companies today, and they have been for the last 20 plus years, a lot of companies are doing something what is called administrative law, I think. It has to do with embarrassing the company. So if you do something that's an embarrassment to the organization with which you were affiliated with, and it embarrasses the company, that's grounds for immediate dismissal from your company. So keep that in mind. Check on your legal, check with your legal experts on your accountability as far as embarrassing the company. And thirdly, I would like to say, just kind of wrap this up, I had a question posed to me this morning. A young fellow I work with, he said, look, I know you're a gun enthusiast, I suspect you know the answer to this. What do I have to do to change my address on my concealed handgun permit? And number two, how often do I have to renew my concealed handgun permit? Well, I'll answer the last one first and the first one next. You never should have to ever take a concealed handguns course again. Once you've taken it originally, unless you think that you need to have some kind of refresher training, something that might be new, you can, I'm all for training. I'd say train as much as possible, but you never are required to get to take that concealed handgun course. As far as change of address, you need to contact your local municipality and see what their requirements are. Now here in Virginia, I know that what we do is we go to the clerk of the circuit court in our county in which we live. We supply the proper paperwork and the monetary amount that it takes to change your address. It's just as simple as that. They give you a renewed concealed permit with your new address on it. Okay, so that kind of wraps that up. Basically, what's on my mind. I hope that helps with people. But remember, I'm not an attorney, so I'm not giving you legal advice. And you need to take that responsibility on yourself to get that information on your own local jurisdiction level.
So we're talking, you're carrying your weapon, whether concealed or not concealed. Your book, it talks a little bit about the Second Amendment. Do you want to dive into that a little bit?
Again, I'll say I'm not an attorney, but I do have a layperson's understanding of the Second Amendment. Let me just kind of break it down for you here. The Second Amendment goes in two parts as far as I'm concerned, and I think the Supreme Court will bear out with me because my decision or rather my understanding of the Second Amendment comes right through a Supreme Court ruling. The Second Amendment says a well-regulated militia, comma, being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, comma, shall not be infringed. Okay, now let's go from the beginning here. Rule number one, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the free state and toward that end is a means in which to achieve that end. Okay, now by that I mean it doesn't say a well-regulated handgun rule. It says a well-regulated militia, which is basically necessary to keep a free state. That's number one right. The number two right is the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So I'm not too worried about the Second Amendment as far as the abolition of the Second Amendment, because number one, I don't think anybody will ever do that because there's too much money to be made in handgun and ammo sales. Number two, I don't think any politician has what it takes to get that done right now. But thirdly, I will tell you, we are at risk of our rights here. If we take a laissez-faire attitude about how the Second Amendment is enforced, then we will ultimately lose it. And I'll explain that a little bit later, but it's all in my book. Just about everything you should know about a handgun. So research your local regulations, your jurisdictional requirements, and get a good understanding of the Second Amendment. Because as a handgun carrier, your number one protection is the Second Amendment.
Again, thank you for joining us here at B2 Coffee House. I'm Hector Rodriguez here with Dave Vesser. Be sure to visit his website at www.dcvesser.com. Take a